When the soul is no longer attached to external contacts, objects, one finds the happiness that is in the self. Such a one who is self-controlled in yoga on God, Brahman, enjoys undying bliss. By external contacts in this verse, Shri Krishna means material enjoyments. The Gita uses words carefully. It does not say, look here, it doesn't say one should not use material objects. It says that one should not be attached to material objects. He uses them, but he does not become attached to them. Material objects are needed, but such a person only uses them if they are needed. He doesn't become addicted to them and doesn't run after them. Such a person finds the happiness that's in the soul and is united with God, who is Satchidananda, existence, wisdom, bliss. He is a yogi and attains such a bliss that is immortal and that can never be destroyed. People create attachments. We think that material objects make us attached. The material objects do not make us attached. A person becomes attached himself. Material objects are things. How can they make us attached? Kabirji had 5 or 7 disciples around him. All his pupils would call him Sahib. One of Kabirji's 5 or 7 pupils had a vice, and Kabirji told him to leave the vice. He told him that he was in a clever way, yet he had this vice, and so advised him to leave it. That people would answer, Sahib, I can't leave it. Kabirji said, fine. Those who have reached the level of Kabirji have completely different ways of explaining things. You have to learn from the behavior what the reason behind the behavior is. He would explain something clearly once or twice, and if that person didn't listen, then Kabirji would change his behavior. When he changes his behavior, then you notice that he wants to indicate something. He was walking with his pupil across the town, and there was a pillar on which there was a roof resting. Kabirji went and hugged the pillar. He stuck onto it. The pupils found it strange and wondered what Kabirji was doing. Kabirji just stayed there, hugging the pole. The people asked him what he's doing and told him to leave it. Kabirji said that he won't let go. The people who had the vice said, how can you not let go? Just let go and you will be free. Kabirji answered, I wanted to tell you the exact same thing. When you were saying that you could not let go, if you just let go, then you'll be free. No external object can hold a conscious soul until the soul itself goes and grabs hold of that object. One should not have this attachment towards material objects. Attachment is like a swamp of mud. The more you try to get out of it, the more you'll be pulled back in. This is what attachment is like. A person creates this attachment for himself. He gets lost in the waves of his imagination and creates attachment for himself. Many people that come to Guruji tell him about the problems in the material world and the problems in their families. Then Guruji gives a slightly radical opinion. He tells them to do something and they say that they can't do it. He tells them, why not? Because all your problems will go away in one sleep. They still cannot do it. This means that they want the attachment and they want to hold on to it. When humans say that they don't like something, that means that they want to be not that they want to be released from it, but they want to change that attachment to something that they like. When someone says they don't like the material world yet cannot leave it, then this means that they're not ready to accept the bad circumstances they have, and this means they want to change those circumstances into good circumstances. When people are complaining about the world, they don't think that they've become detached. No, they want the material world in the way they like it. We all look for material worlds in the way that we like. Every person has a complaint towards the material world, yet none of them wish to leave the material world. This means they wish to stay in the material world and create favorable circumstances for themselves. This is the name of attachment. Kachalal went to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist asked him what was wrong. Kachalal said that every night he went to bed, he kept getting a dream. The psychiatrist picked up a pen and paper in his hand and asked Kachalal to elaborate further on that dream. Kachalal said that he had this dream over and over again every day and even 2 or 3 times on some nights. His dream was that when he would close his shop to go home, he would see a beautiful woman on the road. She would just keep teasing him and giving him remarks, and an ordinary person like Kachalal would get attracted. The woman starts walking and Kachalal keeps following after her. The woman keeps looking back to check that Kachalal is following her and keeps laughing. The woman eventually goes inside the house and takes the keys out of her purse, meaning all the lights in the house are off and she is alone. Kachalal follows her and tries to enter the house, but the woman suddenly closes the door on his face and Kachalal's nose gets hurt by this. The psychiatrist tells Kachalal he understands this and asks Kachalal whether he wishes to become free from this dream. Kachalal says no, because he wants to carry on having this dream, but without the woman closing the door on him. People want these confusions. Who can save someone from this? Did this attachment change? Does he wish to be free from the attachment? No, he wishes to drown in the attachment even more. We laugh when we hear the story of Kachalal, but when we go with questions, then our questions are just like this. The door keeps banging, and we try to open all the closed doors. This is our state. We want to open the door. Sit down and quietly think about the material world that we're complaining about and the family we're complaining about. When the husband complains about the wife and the wife complains about the husband, where the parents complain about the children complain about the parents, what is at the root of all of this? We want everything, but we want everything in the way that we like. We want everything our way. If we wish to become free from attachment and free from dualities, there is only one solution. A human being should have a complete acceptance towards the world. This is because attachment tries to find complaints in the world. It looks for contempt towards the world. If a person thinks that whatever has happened for a good reason, then he becomes free from attachment. Whatever is happening has happened for a good reason. For this, a deep understanding is necessary. Saints say that there's two truths in life. One is pratiksha, waiting, and the other is samiksha, investigation. We always do pratiksha, waiting, but we never do samiksha, which is investigation. Pratiksha, meaning to wait for something. Samiksha, on the other hand, is samiksha, to look at something that is there. Particularly when we're talking about life, the more that pratiksha reduces, waiting, and the more that samiksha increases, then the more that life becomes beautiful and the more that attachment's reduced. This is because pratiksha creates attachments. You're waiting for something, some person or some situation. Pratiksha must reduce and samiksha, investigation, must increase. Do not pratiksha, wait for God's grace. Samiksha, investigate God's grace that has been given to you. See the God's grace being given to you. The majority of people wait for when God will do them grace because they have a certain amount and just wishing for a higher amount for it to be enough for them to say that it is God's grace. They will never be fulfilled because there will never be an end to this. Do samiksha, seeing and investigating. When a merchant sees that it's his financial year end, then he starts to do samiksha, investigation, and sees how much he has accumulated in the last year. Start doing that. Do not do pratiksha, waiting. Look what God has given you, and then you have a sense of gratitude towards God. You will then be able to say that whatever happens, happens for a good reason. Saints give an illustration. There was a king who had a prime minister. Wherever you looked, the king and the prime minister were always together. The prime minister had one habit. If anything happened, he would say that everything that happened for a good reason and that it's God's grace. He'd always say this at every step. One time it so happened, a foreigner came from abroad to sell swords and the king was buying swords. You see a sword, pick it up and observe the blade. One time when the king was feeling a blade, he pushed it too far and his finger was cut off. A lot of blood came out. The king screamed in pain. The prime minister was standing next to him and said that whatever happened for a good reason and that it was God's grace. The king asked him how he could say this when his finger had been cut off. The king asked him how this could be for a good reason and how this could have God's grace. The king got so angry, he took it out on the prime minister. He ordered his soldiers to put the prime minister in jail immediately so he could understand. When 4 soldiers went to capture the prime minister and take him to jail, what did the prime minister say while laughing? He said, whatever happened, happens for a good reason and it was God's grace. The king said that he will understand everything and find out when he gets thrown in jail. The soldiers took the prime minister to jail. Some time went. The king had covered his injury with a bandage and the pain had gone, but the finger had been cut off. The king went out to hunt and there were people all around him. The king saw a beautiful deer and chased after it with his horse. The deer ran so fast in the jungle that everyone else got left behind. The king's horse was fast and began running fast, while the other horses could not keep up with the speed. The deer went sunk deep in the jungle. The king got completely lost looking for it. There's a tribe of indigenous people living in the jungle, and when the king reached there, they captured him. They did not know he was a king. He was just an ordinary person to them. They're completely uncultured people. They needed a human being for a human sacrifice. They tied the king to a pillar and played the drums for 45 minutes for an hour, making noises by putting their hands to their mouths. Then the priest came to kill the king, but before he do this, he had to apply some ointments to the king. While doing this, the priest saw that the king's finger had been cut off and told everyone to stop because this person, the king, would not do. The people asked him why. The priest said that he was of no use. The people asked what happened because they'd worked so hard to bring him here. The priest said that the person put forward for human sacrifices must be intact, whereas this person's finger's been cut off. Therefore, he'd be of no use, and the priest let him go. Because he said this, the people let him go and told him to run away. The king ran through the jungle, searched for the kingdom, and came back to the town. The people found it strange that the king had come back. As soon as he came into the town, the first thing, what do you think the first thing that the king said? So let the prime minister free, because the prime minister had a great vision and because he was wise. The king said, when the prime minister says that everything happens for a good reason, it is right because my finger got cut off for a good reason. I got saved because of it. The king summoned for the prime minister, gave him a reward, and asked the prime minister to tell him one thing. The fact that my finger got cut off was a good thing because I was of no use to the tribe and therefore I got saved. But you stayed in a prison for such a long time and got such a bad punishment. You suffered a lot, so what good was there in that? The prime minister said, there's a lot of good in it, because I stayed with you, I stay with you like your shadow. If we had gone together in that place in the jungle and the tribes people had caught us, then you would have been no use because your finger got cut off, but I would have been better use to them. Rather than that, it is better that I stayed in the jail. Whatever happens, happens for a good reason, and it's God's grace. This is an acceptance of life. Given the circumstances, this is a deep acceptance of life. As a result of this, one becomes free from attachment. Thereafter, whatever happens, happens for a good reason, and there is no need to have attachment towards material objects. Such a person is unattached, and when a person reaches this state, then he enjoys undying bliss, as it says in this verse. This is bliss that is undying, that can never be destroyed. The majority of pleasures are dying pleasures. These pleasures keep reducing. They feel like pleasures. Sometimes and other times they do not feel like pleasures. Balavastad kriya asakta. When we were young, then we felt like playing with toys, but then we lose our interest in them. We don't get pleasures in them. Then what happens? Taruna vastad taruni shakta. As people grow up, then males get pleasure from females, females get pleasures from males, pleasures just keep changing. The happiness that comes from one thing never lasts forever. Here, when one has brahmistiti or union from God, then he gets undying bliss. If I were to explain it in Hero's language, the language of economics, have you heard of the law of diminishing returns? The law of diminishing returns applies to material pleasures, but not to the pleasure of brahmistiti. The law of diminishing returns is that each object keeps giving you lower and lower returns. The pleasure you get in eating the first sweet is not there when you eat the second one, and it's not there even less when you eat the third one. The pleasure in the third one is not in the fourth one. The pleasure in the fourth one is not there in the fifth one. And finally, after eating 10 sweets, there is no pleasure at all. Why does this happen? The sweets came out of the same jar and were all exactly the same. But the law of diminishing returns applies. However, the bliss that comes from brahmistiti is undying. It is there forever and it never reduces. The scriptures describe this using a very simple example. They say that the state of undying bliss is like the rays of the moon, not like the rays of the moon, but like the rays of the sun. The rays of the moon keep increasing and decreasing depending on the period in the lunar calendar. On a full moon night, there's a lot of light, but on a dark moon night, there's no light, but complete darkness. The light from the sun's rays always remains the same during the day, and this is what the state of brahmistiti is like, undying bliss. Next verse, verse 22.